Hi Nariman, really happy to have you today. Thank you for joining this initiative. For those,
Thank you for having me.
yeah, for those of you who are watching, I just wanted to introduce Nariman to you. She's currently the head of talent and development at British Council, and the scope covers South Asia. She's had multiple roles within HR, within different functions of HR. So whether it's talent management or staffing and compensation or business partnering roles at various multinational organizations, so Pepsi, Coca-Cola, British American Tobacco, Jazz. So I think she's just the right person to be speaking with us and to give us some insights on. So
Thank
Narayan,
you so much.
before we begin, I'd just like you to talk a little bit about your current role and what your personal talent philosophy is.
Sure. So currently, as you mentioned, I'm working with the British Council, which is a big change for me to go from hardcore commercial organizations into the development sector. So it's a bit of a shock to my system, but I've been here now for almost 5 years. Well, and I'm quite enjoying it. So currently, like you mentioned, I work with the talent and development team, which is one of our centers of expertise, and I basically report to the UK, and I cover South Asia. And it's interesting because in South Asia, there's certain things we are a little bit behind in when it comes to talent and learning in particular, where the world is moving towards self-access and e-learning and, you know, taking time out for yourself and investing in it. Whereas in South Asia, we still like to have a trainer stand in front of the room and tell us, you know, and the do chai and muft ka lunch wala scene is still very much.
Unless, like,
We have to have the food. We have to have the food. So, you know, it's interesting for me because I'm trying to change that, at least for our team here. Personally, for me, talent management, or looking at talent in an organization, is, I think, the backbone for making the organization run. You need to invest in the people, and it's not just about sending them to training courses. That's not what I think talent or managing talent is about at all. It's about giving them opportunities from working on projects or stretch assignments or shadowing people from who they will learn, because most of your learning will happen on that. You know, we follow that 70-20-10 principle, where 70% is on the job, and I genuinely believe in that. But I do also think that it's important for organizations to invest in people and not just look externally in the market when you don't have something internal, but you need to ask yourself as an organization, why do I not have that someone internally? Why have I not invested in the people that are already there or developed them to take over these roles? So that's how I feel when it comes to talent, that it is a large part is the organization investing in the people, but as an individual, I need to play my part as well. I need to say, I want this, I am ready for this, and I am putting in the work to take over that position. So I think it's an interesting balance, and as HR, you're always trying to get the balance right between the organization and the people. So it's quite a fun role for me as far as I'm concerned.
Great. No, I think it's such an important point that actually training is what's going to help you build those successors and build those people within the organization to be able to also give HR an easier find when it comes to the right candidate, the right person, right?
Yeah.
And I've been following something that you're doing on LinkedIn, using your platform to kind of get tips out to people and to get insights on how they can make their CVs better, how can they stay motivated during these times. And I just wanted to also bring that to another audience as well, and to really talk about. So you must have seen numerous resumes and candidates or interviews during your time. What has stood out for you in a resume, in a job application?
Sure. So I think it's a lot simpler than people think it is to get a CV right. And I've seen people overcomplicate it and put fancy pictures and super fancy formatting and, you know, ye graph bhi dal diya, and they do all this sort of like really cool stuff, which sure, I will definitely notice it and I will pick it up, but I'm not necessarily getting the information that I need with all that extra stuff that you're doing. So for me, like for a resume to get noticed, keeping it simple and to the point is very important, because as we all know, whether it's HR or a recruiting manager, nobody has that time in current or ever to go through like hundreds of CVs and read every single thing that you've written. We spend 10 seconds max to do a quick scan. So to make sure your CV gets noticed, one important thing is to make sure you have a good, clean, and simple format. And by that, I mean, make sure I can quickly see the headlines, pick up, this is your education, this is where you worked, roughly this is the amount of time you've been working. And that's basically what I need to know in terms of whether I want to keep you in the let's review further pile or not. The other thing which people miss out a lot on, and I say this on whether I go to universities or colleges or I speak to people in career counseling sessions, a CV or a resume is not the same as a job description. Please do not copy paste the advert that was sent out when you applied for a position and just plug that in. As an HR director, I did da 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 da.
Yeah.
I don't know about your accountabilities. I need to know about what you did as an individual. What did you bring to this role? So what I want to see are action items, action words, and results. So I want to know I increased employee engagement by 10%, and
Right.
this is how I did it. I need to know if you're in sales that you increased sales or you exceeded targets consistently by 50% every year or whatever it is, you know. So talk about the tangible results. And I know sometimes people feel like in things like HR, I don't really have those kind of tangible results, but you do.
Yes.
Everybody works with numbers now. Everything is about data. All our decisions are data driven. So you definitely have data based things that you can share. And that's really what's going to make me see you as a professional, make me see you as someone who's serious and will make me see you as someone who can deliver. It's not just about I can do the job, but I can do the job well. And this is how well I've done it in the past. So those are the things I think are really important, and unfortunately do not get highlighted enough on resumes these days.
And you're right, I've seen that a lot. Like everybody knows what a salesperson does or a HR manager does, right? But what did you do in particular and what were you able to achieve? So I completely agree with that. And a lot of times we do see that. I've even seen people, so they've had two roles at multiple organizations and the exact same description for both
How
those
is that possible?
roles. Right.
It's yeah. So that key thing of like, you know, making sure that I talk about me as an individual is important. And the thing that you've just said about having similar roles in two separate organizations, but the same exact thing, again, it doesn't help. And it's one last thing I do want to mention is, of course, the customization of your resume every time you send it out. And I know we sound like broken records when we say this, that, you know, for every position, tweak your resume so that it makes sense. And for some reason, people think we're just talking nonsense, and it's not, because it's still not happening. And I think more and more with organizations not relying on paper-based resumes, and you're having online application systems. And a lot of organizations will just type the keywords of the position and see what filters out. And if you haven't customized, and if you haven't added those keywords somewhere, you're just not even going to make the first cut. So that tweaking is so important, especially as we become more and more reliant on artificial intelligence and technology. I mean, you have organizations using artificial intelligence to do the first round of interviews. And if you're not saying those things or not putting them in your CV, you're not even going to clear that very first stage.
Frankly, I don't want to make the effort you've not made, right? I don't want to go into your resume and look for things that you've not helped me see. So bringing me to the fact that especially during this time when there may be opportunities and a lot of people, you know, kind of reaching out for those opportunities, wanting to apply, what do you do right to basically get noticed? What do you do right to stand out amongst all of those people? And what is it that you don't do, right? So we did speak about a few of those things, but what do you not put in there?
Okay, so for me, I'm not a big fan of pictures on resumes. I don't think it adds anything. So I would leave them out. I don't see what value it adds. One other thing, which I think is a very quick turnoff, is people who have very generic personal statements or career objectives. Now, if I can see your career objective and copy and paste it across 10 resumes, again, you're not telling me anything about yourself. So that's going to immediately put me off. Some basic stuff, which still happens, and I don't know how it still happens in the day of spell check and all of these things, are basic grammar or spelling mistakes. not a good impression. You are not putting your best foot forward. This is the first time somebody is meeting you, and that's not what you want to send out. So, you know, just check those things. Also stuff where like dates are inconsistent, or people have sometimes made typos and put the wrong end date or start date, and it just doesn't make sense when I'm reading your CV. So these are some of the basic things that can really turn you off. And then there is those people who, I don't want to say lie, but let's say exaggerate
Right.
things on their resumes. And I know sometimes people think they can get away with it. And I'll be honest, there are people who have made it to an interview with the exaggeration on a resume, but it all falls apart in the interview anyway. But most of the time I can tell based on like the position that you're in and the size of the organization that you're in, what you're saying, how much truth is there to it. So please don't make up numbers, don't make up stuff and stick it in your resume in the hopes of getting noticed, because those things fall through very, very quickly. And even if you clear that CV stage and you make it to the interview, once it gets unearthed in the interview that you made up stuff, the likelihood of you being called to that organization again is very slim, because I'm just going to mark you as someone who just made up stuff and wasted my time.
And I think people don't realize that it is a small industry, and you will find that person somewhere else, or you will come across them again, and you know, I mean, don't do it. Just don't do it.
Don't do it. Just don't do it. And it's sad the number of times I've had people, and even on basic things, which I don't understand why you need to do it. Like when people plug in hobbies, you don't have to have hobbies in your resume. It's useful. Yeah. I want to be interesting. I want to know that, you know, which I can understand for somebody who's a fresh graduate, right? You want to fill up your resume. So you want to talk about a few other things. But as you get more experience, I don't really need to know about your hobbies. And I've had people who've put reading as a hobby. Now, I like to read, or when I had a lot more time, I would read a lot more often. And I would ask them, what's the last book you read? They'd draw a blank. Or, you know, you'd ask them about some very popular things people are reading. And they know, and they'd be like, हाँ, वो मैंने बस वैसे ही डाल दिया था. Or they'll put something like football. And I think generally, एक तो हमारा gender bias बहुत होता है. The female interviewer, she's not really going to ask me about football. But I will ask them about football or cricket, and they'll be like, oh, she knows. Okay, you see, this is your favorite team. Why don't you tell me about them? Don't know anything.
Gone.
So don't do it, guys.
Of course. No. And I think that's an interesting point. Actually, with anything that you put in your resume, be ready to talk about it. Even if it's an assignment, it's a project you did, it's a short-term assignment in another country.
Whatever it is.
You can't talk about it. There's no point of it being there.
I was just going to say, it's really interesting because I've had people who are, let's say, very experienced. And this is a tip for people who are, let's say, who have been working for 15, 20 years. You don't need to list everything from your first job. Because I do know it is sometimes difficult to remember the details of things you did 15 years ago. But as you said, if you've put it on paper, you need to be prepared to talk about it. But the more experienced you get, the less detail you can give about some of your earlier positions, because I'm more interested usually about the stuff you've done recently. And that is why I've called you in for this interview. So I've seen people who have CVs that run like 5-6 pages long. They don't need to be. You can briefly just mention title, year, month, whatever that you worked for your earlier positions. I don't need all the details, again, because I don't have the time, and B, because it probably won't be relevant. I don't need to know your O-level score or your metric score if you're applying for a HR director position.
And also about the role itself, the job that you've applied to, like you said, customize it. So if there's skill that you learned, or something an experience that you had that actually is relevant to the job, put it in by all means. But if it doesn't add, why do you have it in there? It's taking up real estate on your CV. And then for hobbies, I just wanted to say, in terms of what to add, there was someone really senior, and they put down a hobby, and I was actually really glad that they had. And I just wanted to sort of highlight that as well, because there's someone who put on that they were a football coach for their son's school football team. And I think it was really great because it helped show me that they were interested in something else. They were an altruistic person. They could handle a difficult age group of people and had a lot of patience. So So then
That, yes.
actually speak, you know.
I think one of the things that you just mentioned is important. It's about that transferable skill set, right? So whether you were a coach for a young children's football team, there are definitely things that you have picked up. Coaching in and of itself is a great skill, but working with people from, you know, completely different to you, so diversity, etc., you're working on that. So that is a transferable skill that I would want to mention, again, depending on the role that I'm applying for. So you can leave out or add stuff, as you've mentioned, depending on the position, but just always keep in the back of your mind, what is the transferable skill that I picked up here and how does it apply for this current position? And then see if it's a good fit, then add it. I mean, I have put stuff, like I do a lot of stuff outside work. Like I do acting when and where I can. I used to do radio. Now, do I always put it? No, because it doesn't always make sense. But for things like training, I do feel it helps because I've had that delivery practice or knowing how to engage with an audience and that kind of stuff. And I say, yeah, I've done this and this is how it helps me in this particular position. But I don't put it everywhere. Sometimes it helps because it gives you like a little bit of a break in the seriousness of an interview to have that 5-minute casual interaction, and it helps calm your nerves and everything as well. So sometimes it can help, but just be focusing on how does it help add value to what you're trying to sell at this point.
And if it's positive, it makes, if it's something you're confident about, you're happy about, and you want to highlight about yourself, it puts you in a good mood. The interview possibly go better if you're feeling good about yourself.
If you're feeling good, yes. I mean, I'll give you an example of one of the things that we do at the British Council. So generally our interviews, very standard process, competency-based, but we always have one question at the end where we ask people, is there anything you want to tell us about yourself that we haven't asked you about that you feel is important for us to know? And here a lot of people do talk about the stuff they do outside work and how it's helped them or what it brings, etc. So people talk about some of the philanthropic work that they do. They talk about things like, you know, working with children, and all of that. And you're like, oh, okay, you're a whole person. You're not just the job. So getting that balance right is important. But again, it's not necessary that these people put it on their CV. So I might not have found out, you know, but.
Especially if it talks to also the company's values. So where you've applied and what kind of a company they are and what they're looking for, right? And you somehow, if you've not had that in your regular day job experience, you've had that somewhere else and you can bring it to the table.
Yeah, 100%.
Good point. And I'm conscious of the fact that that a lot of people also have a sort of struggle when they're looking at a particular industry that they've not worked in. How open are employers to actually looking at people with diverse skill sets from different industries, roles that they've never been in before?
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd be surprised at how willing to take risks organizations are. And I think when you first start working, so I stayed with my first employer for over 5 years because of this thing, you know, where I was a little bit scared, you know, I'm kind of new. Will somebody else want to take me? I've just done, you know, a few things, etc. So you have a lot of self-doubt yourself, rather than it being that the industry is telling you that you cannot do this. So I don't think it's that much of a challenge to switch industries. The reason being, again, because when you're putting stuff down on paper, focus on the facts, focus on the numbers, focus on the things that you did as an individual. So whether, let's say I went from telco to FMCG to like beverages, and now I'm in development, but everything I learned at my telco experience is still applicable, right? I can still use all of the stuff that I learned over there in my much more senior position now. So you pick up skills in every single position that you take, regardless of the industry that you're in. And I think sometimes people just aren't sure of how to highlight that. And it goes back to that bit around talking about the impact that you as an individual had, and then talking about those transferable skills, because that is the basis that you want to focus on. So whether you need an HR manager in a FMCG or I need an HR manager in the development sector, there are certain things that both HR managers will have to do. And I can highlight that But I can also talk about why someone from an FMCG background is good for the development sector. What is it that I can bring that will be different? And you'll find that a lot of industries are looking for that outsider perspective, because once you're in, you're sort of got that tunnel vision and you know how to do things in one way. So you want to change things and you want to bring in someone from a different background to bring in that fresh perspective, which is why while I do think it's good to focus on internal talent, but getting that balance of internal and external to make sure the ideas keep flowing is equally important. So I don't think organizations are that averse to it. But yes, in certain areas, there will be certain skills that they, a person who is working, let's say, in business development in development sector is not necessarily going to land a senior sales or BD position in FMCG. So you need to be conscious of that. And I think we need to be aware. I'll give my own example. I went from an HR business partnering role to an HR director role at the British Council. It was a big jump for me, I felt personally. And it did require a lot of stretch and learning things like on the go, because I didn't have that kind of time to like just sit and say, oh, somebody will teach me, because there was no somebody to teach me. I had to do it. But I am very aware of the fact that having done a national level HR role in the British Council doesn't necessarily mean that I'm ready to take on a national level HR role for an organization like Pepsi, because there's a difference in size, there's a difference in scale, there's a difference in scope. So you need to be aware of that as an individual as well. I've had a number of people who say, but I'm already an HR director. And it might be for a very small organization. So you need to be willing to say, okay, I might get a step down in title if I make that switch, but that's okay, because I will gain a lot in terms of learning. And I think sometimes people are so stuck on the title part that we forget. Even if you see, like if you go through my LinkedIn, when I left, let's say my first position, I was an assistant manager. My first, organization, I was an assistant manager, but I switched to take on an executive role. And I was okay with that. Yes, the title wasn't as fancy, okay, and I felt like maybe on title wise, I took a step down, but the nature of the organization was different. The amount of learning that I did there was very different. So I think we need to be a little bit, swallow our pride a little bit and not get hell-bent on titles when you're thinking about making these switches. When you're changing industry, you need to give yourself time to learn and to adapt. So it's okay to take the title switch if you feel like it's in line with your career aspirations and stuff, and that's where you want to go. To take that hit, it's fine.
Yeah. And it actually doesn't help you if you're in the wrong job, if you're in a job that requires more from you or something that you don't have at that point in time. I think you set yourself up for failure.
But I will say one thing, and this is like based on a lot of research in terms of specifically for women, we are a lot less likely to apply for positions where we feel we don't meet 100 or 110% of the criteria that are listed, whereas men will be a lot more comfortable even if they meet 50% and they'll send in the resume. Sometimes we do need to be willing to take a chance on ourselves. And I remember when the HR director position opened up, I didn't even apply. I was on mat leave, I'd taken a career break. And, I'd had a baby and I was like, I'll take my time. I'll slowly get into something small that I can eventually build up. And the headhunter kept calling me like, just try it. I'm like, no, I don't think I'm ready for this. I don't have the experience. I mean, my last role was a business partner. I haven't done anything at a national level. He's like, no, but it's small. I was like, I was really reluctant to do it. And between him and my family, like people really pushing me, I said, okay. And I applied. And I know I wasn't necessarily like the first choice, and that's fine. But I went through the second round of interviews and I landed the job. And I remember when I landed the job, I was terrified. And I said to my husband, I was like, I don't want to say yes. I don't think I can do this. What if I'm really bad and they will not even confirm me at my probation, and this is going to be like a permanent like black mark on my CV, and this is too risky. I'm not doing it. And I really was contemplating not saying yes. And sometimes you need that outside perspective to give you that push. And I spoke to one or two people who I'd worked with in the past and who I see as mentors, and they're like, just do it. Yeah. So what if it doesn't work out? Just don't put it on the CV. It's fine. If, it's not that big a deal. If it's a blip, it's a blip, and it happens. And it could be that you weren't ready to go back to work yet. But if it does work, just think about, what a nice chart that comes out for your career. And mashallah, it did work out, thank God. But it was a difficult decision. And I think sometimes we don't back ourselves. And it's really important to find the balance between being, for lack of a better word, cocky, and overconfident, and being sensible about what you can and cannot do. And I think we have to be really realistic, because I've seen people, and this is something which I don't understand, where you see a job advert, regardless of what you have done, you apply for anything and everything that opens up. Don't do that. And I can tell you, we see it, right? Like I can see that same name pop up against, and I'm like, this person, A, doesn't know what they want, and B, doesn't understand how jobs work.
Exactly.
And you have to tell people calmly, look, applying to every single position isn't going to get you an interview. That is, yes, you'll get noticed, but for all the wrong reasons. So when you're applying, be really mindful about what you're applying for. And this works for internal candidates as well. I've seen internal candidates who just want to get out of the current position they're in, so they will apply to everything. But you need to be clear on what you want in your career. You need to be clear on what you think your next steps are. And if you're not, then maybe take some more time in your current position to understand, speak to people, find a mentor or a coach, someone you can discuss these ideas with. And I think we really undervalue the importance of mentors.
Yeah, I think two very important things that you said. One bit on what any crisis or any situation where, let's say, people are not hiring too much, or there's people leaving the organization, or you have to cut costs. There's also opportunities for stretch roles, right? There's also opportunities for you taking on someone else's role. And like you said, being confident enough and realistically knowing whether or not you're able to do it, and raising your hand, which, like you said, a lot of women don't do. And I think any of us, whatever gender, we need to realistically assess our skills. And if you think you can do a good job, see how it goes. Let the other person at least evaluate.
Take the chance. Yeah.
So true. And then, of course, what you said right now as well, in terms of just applying for anything and can, and just putting your resume out there for anything. So I've had that. I've had people with 1 year of experience apply for a director role, and I'm like, what? I mean,
did you read?
What? Did I mess up on the job ad? What did I do wrong? And I don't know why people feel any job that comes up is a way for you to put in your resume, so you at least get into the data bank. Where you do end up is a pile of CVs that weren't shortlisted, and you stay there basically. So we talked about transferable skills. Are there any skills that people can seek to learn at this time, and are there any platforms that you would recommend that they look at, that they explore?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think right now with a lot of us, well, most of us actually working from home, and I know there's some of us who are working much longer days than we were. And there's some positions, for example, which might have been field positions and stuff, where people might have a little bit more free time. And I think it's a great opportunity to invest in self-learning. And there are numerous free, don't have to pay a thing kind of courses available for us. LinkedIn Learning is great. There's a lot of free content, and even the paid content isn't that expensive and easily accessible. Udemy is there, lots of great opportunities, and you just need to search. But like universities like Yale, Harvard, etc., they are all putting out free courses. And if you do a quick Google search of free online courses, you will find it. And this is a great opportunity, especially if you're maybe interested in something that isn't your field, to develop and understand that a little bit more. And I know it's easy to see stuff on paper and say you want to do it. I mean, I know when I graduated from my bachelor's, in my head, I was going to go into marketing or advertising because it's a glamorous one. And I thought, be on sets and doing shoots and blah, blah, blah. I worked in advertising, I think, for like 5 months, and I was like, oh my God, this is so not for me. It's very different on paper, and it is different, out there in the real world, but at least you can build a base and start having conversations around it. So one, look at areas that you might have not explored because you just didn't get the time, things that might be of interest. Some things which I think every industry, every profession is looking at is data analytics. So how do you use big data, whether you are in HR, whether you are in sales, or whether you are in finance? Understanding how to get or drive insights from data is definitely a skill which everyone is looking for. Social media is another one. Again, whether it is HR or marketing, understanding how to use social media or the impact of social media. So all of these things, and sometimes it might just be that you're sitting and playing on social media to understand it better. How am I supposed to be able to tell my HR team to get onto LinkedIn and use it better and as a platform, or tell people who are interested in looking for positions if I haven't explored that tool myself, right? So data, social media, anything digital really is those kind of skills that are becoming more and more essential. And I think this current situation has highlighted that even more, right? Like it's not just about going to the office and the physical things that you can do, or going door to door and making sales, or what are you supposed to do if you can't meet? How am I delivering training virtually if I cannot get my people together in a room at a hotel? How am I going to do this? I still need to deliver. So looking at these kind of things, exploring kind of tools, etc., are great. It's a great opportunity and a great time to do it. And like I said, a quick Google search will give you so many, but the very popular ones, like I said, Udemy is out there, LinkedIn Learning, lots of great stuff. And one of the things I think which I wish we would realize is a skill that really needs to be worked at, and it doesn't get worked at enough, and it's there in every department, in every industry, is basic people management. I genuinely feel like you wouldn't need HR as much as you do right now if people did their job of line managing people. I feel like HR 90% of the time is doing the job of a line manager, and the stuff that the line manager thinks isn't important or doesn't have time for.
Yeah.
So the people management side, and there's so many courses and things that you can do online to focus on that. And I know a lot of the times we think it's common sense. And I mean, it might be, but we will tend to mimic what we have seen. So if we've had bad managers, we will create more bad managers because we will continue to be bad managers. Some people, yes, will say, oh, I know that's what I do not want to do with my team. But it's very easy to fall back into those patterns. It's an easier way to do things. So I think one of the things I would love for people to focus on right now is that people side of things. And you will find more and more that for businesses even, it's not just about the numbers, right? People want leaders. They don't want business managers. They want leaders who will engage and who will inspire. So if you want to grow, you need to get that people part right. And it does require a lot of practice. It does require a lot of conscious effort to get it right. It's not just, okay, I've read theory X and Y and now I understand. No, it's not that simple. People are complicated beings. And yes, you need to understand each of your individual team members and spend time with them. And right now, when you cannot just call everybody for a meeting, it is even more critical. So figure it out. Like, take this time to understand how do you spend time.
Especially during this time, I think some of the things that you mentioned, so digitally enabling your teams, making sure that they have what they need to be able to do this well. And we don't know how long this will go on, right? Or if this is how we're going to be working in the future.
This could be the new normal, right?
Exactly. So how do you do that as a manager, as a leader? And then how do you get people to stay motivated, especially in a time where they can't see you, meet you, or speak to their other co-workers? How do you keep the team spirit alive and make sure that what you need to deliver gets delivered? I think so crucial, so critical right now. And of course, data analytics, to be able to be a better leader in the organization, to be able to look at it from the perspective of the company, and what is it that even to currently report out what you've done, even to highlight, like you said, on a CV, to highlight what you've done well. It's so important to be able to look at KPIs, numbers, analyze them, look at it from the perspective of the audience that you're going to be sharing it with.
Yeah.
So certainly, skills that are crucial right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting when you talked about like line managers and being able to connect with the team. And it's funny because some people that I work with, having a casual conversation comes naturally, and some are very work. So we've encouraged people to set up casual catch-ups maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks with their team. And some people genuinely like struggled with it. Like, how do you have just a chit chat with people when you can't see them and when you can't sit with them? And and I found it funny because for me, I felt like, oh, this is a no-brainer, right? Because it's something I feel comes naturally to people. And I think we need to re-examine what does come naturally to people. It's not as natural as we think it is, or it's different for that person to be sitting at home and talking to their friends and family versus talking to colleagues. Not everyone is comfortable having that casual conversation, and we need to figure out how to get that balance right. And it's tough for a lot of people, and I think we need to be, especially as HR, be aware of it. And I think sometimes we're not. One other thing I do want to mention in terms of things or skills that people can focus on is I sort of mentioned how finance needs to understand how marketing works, or HR needs to understand the business side of things. And I think especially when we aren't necessarily towards the top of the hierarchy, we don't take the time to understand how the business functions as a whole. And this is a great time to do that, because businesses need to refigure out like how they function, first of all. But to be able to contribute or be, make those kind of valid insights, etc., you need to understand the business as a whole. So if I'm working in HR, it's not enough for me to understand HR. If I'm working in tech or IT, that is not sufficient. I need to know how my role impacts the wider organization, no matter how small that role is. So even if you're not going out of your way to do online courses, go out of your way to connect with people in the business, to understand how the business functions, to understand how you can play a part to contribute, and what is the part that you need to play, because then you'll be able to get those creative ideas and say, okay, you know what, if this is what we actually need, what I'm doing right now doesn't help, maybe I just need to shift a little bit this way, and I can push it a little bit more. So I think just taking the time to understand the business or the industry that you're operating in, and be mindful of the industry, right? So it's not enough to just know what me as XYZ telco is doing. I need to know what the other telcos are doing. I need to know what is happening on the global scale of these industries. And I think sometimes we don't make the time and effort to do that. And sometimes we genuinely don't have the time, but having that wider understanding can really help. And I think right now is a good time to spend doing research on these things, because why not?
You're actually so right. So a lot of times, a lot of junior associates have revealed to me during discussions that the global emails that come, they kind of save them in a separate folder to never come back to ever. So
yeah,
you're part of a company, you're part of an establishment. You want to understand what they're up to, what their objectives are, what their vision is. Who are you within that entire?
What part of that big wheel are you? Like, which cog? You need to know that.
Exactly. So yeah, keep your eyes and ears open to what's happening around you within the company, within the industry that you're in, and also within your role. So like you said, if there's a technological advancement, if there's something that somebody else, a new software another company is using, at least look at what it is. Tomorrow when you're applying for a job, you may have to show if you know it or not. You need to be, I think you need to be curious both about yourself and about, where you are in the job that you do. Because if you're not, that will show through your interest within yourself and within the career that you're carving out.
Yeah. Where does your passion actually lie, right? Like if it's just a 9-to-5 for you, then your interview will see it as just a 9-to-5 for you as well. I am not going to take a risk on let's say, where I need a high performer or someone who's genuinely committed with someone who's kind of like, yeah, I come to office because I have to, so that doesn't work for me. And it is that extra bit of passion or that drive that ends up landing you in interviews. And I think one of the things that you just mentioned is important to talk about a little bit more. People within the industry, like your network, the networking part is so important. And especially when with things like LinkedIn and stuff, I get people who add me all the time, but nobody's telling me why they want to add me. I have absolutely no link with you, and you're not, let's say, from an HR background. The people who take the time out to send like a 2-3 line email that I want to connect because of XYZ, or I saw this and I want to understand a little bit more, I will remember you. Yeah. And I will take the time out to like connect with you. But and just like when you go to networking events or like you go to a conference, it's a great opportunity to sell yourself. And I know for a fact, I personally have hired people I have met at events, or at least made recommendations for those people because they made a good impression. It was a 1 minute, 2 minute interaction, but they were clear. They knew what they wanted. They were able to put it in a concise manner. And I remembered. So I've had positions open up. I'm like, hey, you know what? I know someone who you should contact. This is their contact, just, or I'll nudge them and ask them to apply online. I will not do safarish. That's not what this is. It is not that. It is definitely, I'm not going to say you have to hire this person. I'll never do that. But I will try to make an opportunity or for someone to walk through the door at least. And you need to take advantage of those things. So whether you go to conferences, or even if you're just, tapping people on the shoulder to find out, hey, I heard this is happening at your organization. If it's not confidential, can you share a little bit more? So that you remain top of mind for people and you're not just background noise, So it's good to keep those connections alive as well.
And I found that super helpful right now during this time, because just with all the different notifications coming out, and what do companies do, what do they not do?
What is actually a real notification? What is fake? Because God knows we get so many fake notifications.
Yeah. So understanding what people, and even just understanding how people are doing things like, coffee connects, or how they're disseminating training, or there's people, like we're focusing on also sort of putting out a grief directory out there for people who lost somebody, who have someone going through something painful. So things that you may not just think of, but someone else has it and you're like, okay, I could look into that. That could be useful. And that network really comes in handy.
Yes.
So really great points. Thank you, Nariman. I think this was fantastic, and got to know a lot of things also on what to do and what not to do. And I'll make sure that I stay tuned to your work documents. I hope others do too, because it's certainly very useful, and just really fantastic that you were able to take out the time and speak with me. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed. It was a very fun, free-flowing conversation, which is always great. And I think it's a great initiative that you have here, where you're connecting people with so many different people from different backgrounds. So it's definitely a great platform that you've created. So thank you for having me.